Hey everyone, this is Dr. Matt with the Ethos Athletes Podcast, and today we're continuing our series on the benefits of weight training and anti-aging. And today, for today's particular episode, we're going to be talking about the benefits of weight training on your metabolism. And so in this series, I have my good friend Janet McConnell, who is a personal fitness trainer, owner of Galaxy Girl Fitness, and a competitive bodybuilder here for the series. So Janet, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Matt.
So as I said, we're going to be discussing metabolism today and how weight training affects your metabolism. So the word metabolism kind of gets thrown around in a lot of different ways, but what I want to do, and one of the things I want to clear up, is kind of give a little bit more in depth of what is metabolism, because a lot of people throw it around, but they don't always know what it means. So we're going to start with the basic definition first, and then we'll go ahead and get into a little bit more detail about it. So, Janet, what is metabolism?
Well, in my world, the way I talk to my clients about it and the way I think about it is it's just the actions and the processes that happen in your body that convert nutrients into energy in order to survive and thrive. So it's taking in some kind of fuel and utilizing it for energy.
Yeah, and that's a perfect definition, and one that a lot of people understand. And so now I want to kind of go into a little bit more about metabolism and go into a little bit more of the details about it. So as Janet said, it's essentially us using fuel. And this fuel is typically, or is going to be protein, carbs, and fat, and turning it into energy so that our body can utilize. And that's, again, kind of summarizing what Janet said. Now, if you remember in our previous episode where we talk about insulin, I went ahead and gave a little bit more in-depth conversation regarding glucose, and how glucose, when we basically followed the metabolism of glucose. And so we're going to use that example again, and then just know that this also applies to some degree with proteins and fats, but the chemical reactions are different than what glucose is. So if you were to eat carbs, glucose is going to be one of those carbs that you intake. And what happens is you actually, glucose first goes to the liver, and the liver uses it to make energy so that the liver can function. And if the liver, once that energy requirement is fulfilled, then glucose, or the liver then takes glucose and stores it as glycogen, and that's what regulates your blood sugar throughout the day when you're not eating various things like that. Later on, or after the liver, the remaining glucose goes to the pancreas, which does a very similar thing that the liver does, just not to the extent that the liver did. And then from there it goes to muscle. And in muscle, glucose is turned into energy that is required to power the muscle, and then the muscle also makes glycogen to store some extra glucose for when you need it readily available. So let's say you burn through the first, the glucose that's in your muscle, and you need to add more power to it, essentially, or add more fuel. Then that's where glycogen comes into play and does that. Now, if your energy storage if your energy is high and your glycogen levels are high in the muscle, then it leaves the muscle, glucose leaves the muscle and then goes to fat. And in fat, it does the same thing. So it'll give energy to fat cells, and then if there's any energy left, or once the energy requirement is fulfilled, it'll get stored in the fat. And then if the storage of fat is in excess, then it goes back into the blood, and that's where we have the high glucose and all this other stuff. So that's when it becomes problematic. But in the rest of what we went through, that's what happens in a normal, healthy person. Now, one thing that I didn't mention in the insulin podcast is that what's required, and you may remember this from high school, what makes energy in the muscle, or more specifically in the muscle cells, are mitochondria. And these mitochondria are super important when it comes to anti-aging, and weight training we'll talk about has a direct effect on it. And so mitochondria are, if you remember, the term that was typically used in high school science was it's the powerhouse of the cell, and that's because it's where energy is made. And so when we're talking about metabolism, we are indirectly and somewhat directly talking about what's going on with the mitochondria. And there's other processes that are involved as well, but the mitochondria is where energy is made, and without those, then we can't function as a human. Essentially, we would have no life. And so that's a little bit more in depth talk about metabolism. There's still more to it, but again, we're going to keep it somewhat basic. I don't want to give a science class right now. So we talked about how glucose, and how glucose comes from carbs, and then the other sources of fuel that our body utilizes are protein and fat. Now, Janet, is there a difference in quality, or is all fuel created equal?
Well, I think most of the people listening have probably puzzled over this, because we hear a lot in media and in things that you read about diet and exercise. There is a school of thought out there that says all calories are equal. Calories in, calories out. Count your calories, burn the calories, and that's all you have to care about. And if you are overweight, that's because you're eating too many calories. And that's a very flawed idea from the standpoint of how the fuel is utilized in the body. So when you think about an analogy, which I like to use because it makes it easier to understand, we all understand cars and how you put gas in the tank, and then the gas is burned in the engine and it combusts, and then there is exhaust. Well, you notice that with a car never gets fat, because for a car, all energy is equal pretty much. A human body is a lot like a car mechanically, but what we really are is a biochemical car in a way. We're a biochemical machine. What that means is all fuel is not equal. So there are some calories that, because of the way they are constructed, the molecules are so small that they burn really, really fast. And they get into the bloodstream really quickly, and they make insulin react really quickly and spike high. And then there's other calories that you eat that are more complex, larger, and it takes longer to break down. It's a slower process. Those would be more like proteins, fiber, like your vegetables, and some of your more complex carbohydrates that come directly from vegetables. They take longer, so they're going to have a different effect on your body.
Yeah, no, and that's what she's saying. And if you haven't heard our previous podcast with Kelly Michelle, this isn't a new concept that we've talked about on this show. Not all calories are created equal, and not all fuel is created equal. And again, if you want to drive that home, we're going to be referencing some of those podcasts as well a little bit later in the show. But definitely go listen to our nutrition series, and you'll get that if you don't have it already. Now, there's a few different things that we want to look at, and some of the questions that I get asked is, what slows down my metabolism? What speeds it up? We discussed what it is, and so let's talk about what slows it down. And again, so part of what slows down metabolism can be, there's a medical piece to it where hormones come into play, and we're going to discuss those again. But if you want a little bit more in-depth discussion about hormones in particular and how they slow down metabolism, go listen to our hormone optimization and nutrition for women and for men. There's two separate podcasts. We also have the insulin one that we talk about that as well. But so Janet, in your experience, and you see this all the time with your clients, what is it that slows down their metabolism, or what all the research that you've done, because you're a science nut as well. And
yes.
So what have you read that slows it down, and what are some of the common things that you see?
Well, and I've seen examples of this in my own practice and with my own training and my own results in working with the body. One of the most important ones, and one of the ones to really look at first if you are interested in raising your metabolism, is understanding what slows it down. And one of the things that slows it down is refined carbohydrates. So refined means small molecules. Now this sounds kind of tricky because we all think of sugar as something that makes you have more energy really fast, and you get really hyper. We get a sugar high, we talk about it. But as soon as the sugar high ends, which is pretty quickly, you feel bogged down, and it stays bogged down from there. So refined carbohydrates, after a quick rush, really slows it down. There is a quick absorption that happens, and then what happens after that is insulin surges into the system to handle the glucose, to help metabolize the glucose. When you have too much glucose too quickly, insulin overreacts. And when you have too much insulin in your system, that directs the body to store fat. In fact, insulin is a fat-storing hormone. So every time you overeat in a simple carb way, you're going to instruct your body to store fat because of all the insulin. And in that group of foods, it would be things made with refined flour, refined sugar, and liquid carbohydrates, as in juices and alcohol. So all the baked goods, cookies, breads, even whole grain bread. My clients ask me, well, that's healthy, right? Well, it is healthy in that the body recognizes it as not a poison. It's not a toxin to eat that, but it's very refined, so it's still going to raise your glucose, and if you have too much, it's going to cause you to store fat, and that slows you down. Another tricky one, a second one, would be lactose, which is the sugar that's found in milk. I know there are people out there listening that may be glucose intolerant, and so you don't even have to battle with this because you're not consuming any dairy products anyway. But for those of you that do, like your Greek yogurts and your cheeses and some of the things that have lactose in it, when it has OSE at the end of the word, it's a kind of sugar: sucrose, fructose, glucose, lactose. So milk, and especially for women, for some reason, it's very, very hard to lose weight when you eat milk products, dairy products. Another one that is kind of maybe from my teenage years, I learned as a 19, 20-year-old that I could skip meals and I would lose weight overnight. And it was a great way to make up for all the sins of my bad snacking. But something happens when you get to be middle-aged or older. When you skip meals, your body has the opposite reaction because you no longer have that youthful vitality. You have a body that's going to respond sensitively to skipping meals. Having not enough calories will trick your body into thinking that your cave-dwelling self, there's a famine in effect. And it comes from our ancient programming that our body does to save our lives, to think, okay, we need to slow down our metabolism because this person is going to die if they don't get any more food until the next time you eat. So skipping meals actually makes the body think that it needs to slow down to save your life. And dehydration dovetails with that. If you're not drinking enough water, your metabolism will slow down its processes in order to preserve what little water you have left in your body so that you will still live, because maybe in your cave-dwelling self, you think there's a drought. So your brain sometimes is being wise with the old ways, not realizing that there's a bottle of water in your backpack and that you really do have water available. It doesn't know that. It thinks there's a drought. So make sure you don't skip meals, eat regularly. Make sure that you stay hydrated, 2 to 3 liters a day. That can really help your metabolism. And then the last one that I highlight here is cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that your body produces as a way of dealing with stress. And it can be a good friend or a bad friend. So I always think of cortisol as being kind of like the kid who's neutral, and if he's put in with a bad crowd, then he reacts not in your favor. But if he's with a good crowd, then he can help you. So cortisol helps with muscle growth if it's not mixed with all the stress hormones. So cortisol then is sort of a Jekyll and Hyde hormone. And you produce it when you're stressed, even when you're happy or unhappy. So you have to really watch the cortisol production.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we talked about, again, cortisol in the hormone lecture, or in the hormone podcast, where we talk about how cortisol affects it. And there's, just to kind of recap on some of those, there's other hormones that come into play. So testosterone is one in both men and women that can come into play. estrogen is some other ones as well. And then the most popular one is going to be thyroid. And so someone that has that they're low in thyroid hormone, that's a common way for metabolism to be slowed from a medical perspective. And so a lot of people will come in, I need to get my thyroid checked, and if the symptoms fit, we obviously check it, and there's differences between medically normal and optimal and suboptimal and all this other stuff. And so you want to make sure you're going to someone that can recognize that, because medically normal doesn't always mean that the person still feels good. And so that's an important distinction to make. And how about let's go into talking about things that speed up metabolism. So what have you seen in your experience that helps speed up metabolism?
Okay, well, one of the first ways I would recommend to speed up metabolism is to have high quality protein and high fiber in your nutrition. Oftentimes we don't eat enough protein or have enough fiber. And the reason those are helpful is, well, for the protein part of it, because it does not trigger insulin to metabolize the way sugar and gets insulin going. So here's a good example. If you imagine if you could eat 3 glazed donuts in a row, just sit down and eat 3 glazed donuts, high sugar, right? And then if you could instead, could you eat 3 baked chicken breasts in a row in one sitting? Most of us would say no to that, because protein, the chicken breast, does not, you get full before you can eat that much because of the hormone leptin coming in and telling you you're full. The problem is, here's the thing, a glazed donut and a normal sized chicken breast that's baked has the same amount of calories, plus or minus about 40 calories. So when you think about how much protein you can really eat in one meal and be able to have good metabolism versus having that sugary donut, which doesn't feed you and makes you want to store fat, you can see the value of having the protein. And then fiber, of course, it takes more energy to break down. It keeps your digestive tract healthy. So it's going to make all of the detoxifying your body and carrying away waste much more easy. It just makes your body healthy all around. With the protein, you want to make sure you get really high quality though. Some people ask me, well, what about lunch meat? What about bacon? What about pork rinds? All of those kinds of food are very low quality protein. They're high in acid, and they actually make your liver really have to work hard. But if it's high quality, wild caught fish, grass-fed beef, free-range chicken, organic eggs, all those things are much higher in quality, so they're going to be less acidic. The other thing that can raise your metabolism is to time your meals so that your blood sugar stays more even rather than plummeting and then skyrocketing up and down like a roller coaster. It's really important because this is a tough one because everybody's a little different. So you're going to have to experiment to find what works best for you. Some people like intermittent fasting. Some people like eating 3 meals a day. Some people eat once every 3 hours. There's different body types for each one of those. None of them are wrong. It's important for you to try and find out which one times right for you so that you maintain your energy surge throughout the day really evenly so you don't have that roller coaster exhausted or overcharged feeling. The third one would be, as I mentioned, in what can slow down your metabolism, hydration can actually speed it up because your body doesn't have to work so hard to be able to process the food that you've eaten. And also your brain. Your brain is, 80% water? Is that about right, Dr. Matt?
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's pretty high percentage for
sure. So if you're feeling fuzzy-headed, you might be dehydrated.
Yeah.
A fourth one would be increasing lean muscle mass. So the more muscle you have on your body in proportion to fat is going to help you and increasingly raise your metabolism. One of these things that I learned in my reading is that 5 pounds of muscle burns 250 calories in 24 hours doing nothing, like sitting on the couch, watching Dancing with the Stars, you are burning 250 calories in 24 hours just with 5 pounds of muscle on your body. That's it. Of course, you're not going to do that all day. You're going to use those muscles, and you have more than 5 pounds of muscle. So in 1 week, get out your calculator and figure out how much are you really burning in a week just keeping muscle on your body. That's another reason why you should not skip meals, because you don't get enough calories. Fat, on the other hand, 5 pounds of fat only burns 10 calories in 24 hours. So it's cheap real estate. Imagine if you were to do a diet where you're only eating 1,000 calories a day and your body is being very smart. Your body is going to dump muscle and save fat, because dumping muscle is less expensive than saving fat. So you can see if you're thinking smart here, the more you stick with your calories and eat your protein and eat your fiber and build muscle through resistance training, the more calories you can eat. And when you have that occasional pizza or ice cream sundae, your body can kind of absorb it, and it won't show up on your body unless you keep doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get a little margin of error that your muscles will forgive you and help you out with. I can tell you that as a bodybuilder, I can eat a lot more calories now than I could at the same weight on the scale, but with higher percentage body fat.
Yeah, and let's talk about a little bit more why that is. And this is one topic I really wanted to get into, or subtopic I wanted to get into in here is when you weight train, or actually here, let's go back really quick to the example I gave earlier about how, I walked you through the pathway of metabolism, and I said how the mitochondria are what create energy in your body. And so mitochondria are found in all types of cells throughout the body, so muscle cells, liver cells, all that stuff. And when we're looking at the mitochondria specifically, again, it makes energy. So when you are weight training and you are building muscle mass, an effect of weight training is that because you're stressing your muscles or because you're using your muscle and you're requiring more energy of them, your muscle cells actually go and compensate and want to improve the amount of energy that's needed. And so what they do is it actually creates more mitochondria within the cell. So a given one cell, in the textbook back in high school, when you looked at the inside of a cell, it had 1 mitochondria. Well, cells can have more than 1 mitochondria. They can have a few hundred if needed. And what happens is, as your muscle requires more energy, these muscle cells start to produce more mitochondria, and so now you're able to produce more energy at a given point. So when you're exercising, it's great because now your muscle doesn't fatigue as much, and which is why you notice you're able to lift heavier, lift more often, various things like that. Now, how that translates into once you're done working out is what Janet had alluded to, where you have a higher resting metabolic rate. And you have that because you have all this mitochondria produced. And so now, even if the muscle's just sitting there, you're able to burn significantly more energy just sitting there than you were prior to it, because now you have 5 times the mitochondria that you had prior to working out or to weight training. So the more you weight train, the more mitochondria you have. And there's plenty of studies that show, I think it's something like 10 weeks of weight training or resistance training. They went and took a biopsy of the muscle of this group of people before and after weight training, and they were able to confirm that there was way more mitochondria after the 10 weeks of weight training. And when it comes to anti-aging, kind of tying it back to our theme, mitochondria have been shown to be super important in the anti-aging process, and individuals who age slower have more active mitochondria and a larger quantity than someone who ages significantly faster. And there's more to aging than just mitochondria, but there is a massive part to that. And so if you're wanting to be able to cheat, like Janet said, and have that piece of ice cream or that little bit of ice cream and not suffer from it, it's you achieve that by getting a more energy expenditure in your resting state and you do that by increasing the amount of mitochondria through weight training. And so that's why 5 pounds of muscle burns 250 calories compared to 5 pounds of fat. And it's because there is that significant difference in the amount of mitochondria that are found in that muscle. This translates to other things as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the rest of the series. But I just wanted to kind of explain that a little bit more in depth, so you understand why that is, why muscle actually burns more than fat. And it's just not a fact that's given. It's there's science behind it. And then you have one more thing that Janet that helps with increasing metabolism, correct?
It's really interesting to me because I resisted internalizing this one for a long time personally. And the last one here is rest. Because we think of rest as being a time when your metabolism slows down. That makes no sense. Why would rest be something that speeds your metabolism? Well, in fact, while you're resting, yes, your metabolism slows down because it's cleaning and it's repairing and it's doing a lot of work behind the scenes. But because it's able to do that, you're able to build muscle better. You get a more complete repair so that your muscles work. Internally, your guts, your intestines get cleaned out. Everything works better because you are resting. And I found this out in a very profound way, just personally in the last year of training for a bodybuilding show, because a lot of times people think you have to lift weights and you have to eat clean and then you do a ton of cardio and that's the only way you can get ready. But what I found is, especially being 62 years old, when I did a ton of cardio, I started to lose muscle and I started to get too much cortisol. So it was stressing me out body-wise. My body was overworking and overtraining and it started to have a negative effect. So what I did instead was, instead of doing cardio literally for this last contest that I was in, I weight trained crazy, lifted really heavy. I ate clean, I never cheated. And instead of doing cardio, I took a nap.
I like it.
I took a nap. So 45 minutes of cardio? Nope, 45-minute nap. And I did it religiously the whole way through. In fact, if my trainer ever hears this, he probably will freak out. But I went with my gut, I went with my intuition on this, because I found then all of a sudden my growth in my muscle was much more consistent. I felt better, I had more energy. I started gaining the muscle weight that I wanted for my competition. And my whole body, I was just healthier. I didn't get sick. I had better immunities. It made all the difference in the world. And who wouldn't like to take a nap instead of doing cardio?
Yeah, that would definitely be nice. No, that's great. So the rest is obviously super important in addition to the other stuff that Janet had mentioned. Eating clean, making sure you're hydrated, timing your meals and making sure that you have enough energy throughout the day, and then of course resistance training or weight training, and we went into why that is. Those are some basics on metabolism. Hopefully you got to pick up a few new things if you didn't know those already. And our next podcast is actually going to be the benefits of weight training on the body. And of course, we discussed a little bit today, but we're going to get more in depth with it, and how weight training helps your body in the anti-aging process. Janet, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
I hope you all enjoyed the show, and we'll catch you on the next one.